It's time to get started. And so we're going to talk about the Power Platform. And so I did not update my deck to change Flow to Power Automate. So it's okay. We know it's Power Automate. Okay.
And for those of you who think you're in Marco's session, it's actually upstairs now.
It's upstairs.
So.
All right, go learn about many-to-many. All right, so my name is Patrick LeBlanc.
And I am not Adam Saxton. I'm Phil Seamark. I do work with Patrick and Adam on the CAT team, and I've come all the way from New Zealand to do this session.
Yeah.
How many in the audience are from New Zealand or Australia? Have travelled that far? No? Wow, okay.
Just you.
There's usually one or two.
Just
it's a
you,
shame,
buddy.
because if I see there's an Australian hand, I go for the kill and start picking on them. But
Just you.
But thank you, and thank you all for coming. Welcome.
Yeah, especially late this afternoon. So both Phil and I work on the customer advisory team for Power BI customer advisory team. And we experience a lot of different scenarios from our customers. And that's what this particular session was birthed from, all right? It was an actual customer scenario. They were trying to solve a problem. This was actually last year before a lot of things have changed with this. I have not updated it to accommodate all these changes because I just didn't feel like it works the way it is. Once Phil and I go through this, if you guys find some new and interesting ways to make it better, shoot me a note. I'm happy to know. And I will add that to my presentation and take all the credit for it. All right? Yeah, okay. So
there has been a lot of announcements this week too, from Ignite and everywhere. So
I really don't care if you don't silence your cell phones. I will say something if your phone rings. Explore everything past. There's tons of stuff.
We're in the basement. No one's got reception. The phones aren't going to ring. In fact, it's going to affect our demo maybe. So
please fill out your evaluations. It's really important for the conference so they can decide if they want Phil and I to come back. All right, so this is the stuff we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff today in the next 2 hours and 45 minutes. And so we're going to take it really slow and meticulous so we don't skip or miss anything. But I think I got it all covered here, and I need to turn Flow. I think, did I delete Flow off of this? No, I need to turn Microsoft Flow to Power Automate.
And PowerApps has a space in it now.
Oh, and PowerApps has a space in it. Okay, so I need to fix all this stuff, all right? Okay, so what is the Power Platform? The Power Platform is PowerApps, Power Automate, and
Power BI.
Power BI. Mm-hmm. I forgot that one.
It's an important part.
It's an important part. And what we're finding is that using these technologies, we can actually solve some interesting scenarios. And so when I first started working on this team last year, I started working on this team. I got an email from someone at Microsoft we call the account team. It was a technical solution specialist. And he's like, hey, I'm working with this very large company, and they're trying to do this, okay? And so they presented me with this challenge. And they're like, can we do geographic filters within Power BI? Can we do geographic filters in Power BI? Yes or no? Yeah? How? Nope. Right? I don't want to just filter it. I want it to say, Patrick is standing right here.
And what do you actually mean by a geographic filter?
Yes, right? So Patrick is standing right here, and I want to filter things that are really close. I only want to see things that are really close to Patrick. Sorry? Geofencing?
Yeah, that sounds good. So it knows where he is and can give him insights and analytics and information based on the area that he's physically standing at that point. Next day he might be in a different city. He doesn't want to see the rest of the world. He just wants to see information relevant to where he's physically standing. So,
does it make sense?
Yeah.
So that's
just in the mobile app today.
All right. So there's a guy in the front row who thinks he's part of this presentation.
Give him the mic.
I don't know if he submitted to Pass Summit. Maybe they didn't accept him, but he thinks he's Patrick or Phil Seamark.
But he's smart.
I kid. Yes. So, yes, you can do geographic filtering with the Power BI mobile app, right? And I'm going to talk about it and how you set it up, and there's some limitations and things like that, right? So here's the scenario. this is the scenario they put out to me. Let's say you're a traveling store director, right? Let's say you're this guy, right? In the office, right? In the office space. Let's say you're this guy, and you're visiting your stores, and you like to quickly filter it down and look at the sales or the widgets or whatever it is, right? The store is selling the hamburgers or coffee or whatever they sell, right? And you want to quickly filter it based on your location. So I'm standing right here with Phil, and I only want to see the stores that are the closest to me because, that's what they want to do. And I said, yeah, with the Power BI mobile app, you can do it. And they were like, show us how to do it. I was like, I technically never did it before, but I read a document that said you could do it. So I called this lady, Maya, who lives in Israel, who owns the mobile app. And I was like, Maya, how do you do this? And she was like, all right, let me show you, Patrick. So we walked through it. And I like to call this the first attempt. And during the first attempt, I built out this Power BI report using the mobile app. Now, it supports iPhones, Androids, and Windows 10 phones. I know everybody uses Windows phones, but I have some bad news for you guys. It does not support BlackBerry. It doesn't. It does not support BlackBerry. Sorry, all right? Even the latest fancy new BlackBerry, it doesn't support it. I'm sorry if all you guys are using BlackBerry. All your geo names must be in English, okay? And you have to categorize, and if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I'll show you what I'm talking about. You have to categorize those values when you design your model. So when you're in the desktop, you can choose city, you can choose state, and I'll show you for you guys that don't know, I'll show you how to do this. And so I put all these slides in because the first time I did this presentation, people complained because I didn't use any slides. I just walked through the whole thing, and they're like, you got to give us some slides, man. I'm not really good at presenting slides. So you categorize it, and then you see right there, you go into the data category, and I know the desktop has changed and the ribbon and everything. I'll update these slides one day. And you categorize it as city. And then the little globe will appear next to it, and then you build your report using those geographic data types. Those fields in the report. You have to use those, okay? And the most important thing is you need to make sure you optimize this report for mobile. How many of you guys optimize your reports for mobile? Just a few, right? Because most people probably aren't looking at the devices on their phone.
So how do you optimize your report for mobile?
I'm going to show you.
Cool.
I'm going to show you. Thank you for asking, Phil. And so we're going to talk about that. So let's just jump right over to the demo, the first demo. So in the first attempt, I imported all of the data from their sample that they provided me, Phil. And then what I did was I created my model, and you can see right here I have city. And now in the new desktop, for you guys who haven't seen the new desktop, we have a new ribbon and everything in the desktop. And there's some new options in the desktop. I choose column tools, and you can see where it says data category. And then you just need to do this for city and state.
Is that the new ribbon?
Yeah, that's the new ribbon.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it's nice, right? And so you do it, and once you do that, you'll see right there that it puts the globe by it. So you have to do that for city and state if you want the mobile phone to pick it up, all right? And then you go to view, and you go to phone layout, and then you just drag those elements and optimize it for mobile. And I was so excited. This is a true story. So I was so excited, I emailed the TSP back. I was like, I got this, man. Put them on the phone. Let me get on the phone with them. I'm gonna make you look like a genius after this is done. He was like, all right, Patrick, let's get on the phone. So we got on the phone. It's a true story, Phil. I can't make this up. I published the report. I got on the phone with them, and I'm gonna show you what I did. So I have this little tool, this little thing that I downloaded because I'm cheap. And so can you guys see my phone over there on the screen? Yes? Okay. And so using the mobile app, I published the report, and then using the mobile app, I'm on the phone with them, right? And I'm showing them this. I'm so excited that I'm sharing my phone on my screen over Teams with them. I'm so excited. And I went to my workspace. And so number one, it's got to catch up. It's way behind. Come on, buddy. I'm on my Wi-Fi. I have to be on. Oh, there we go. All right. And so I loaded this up for them. And what's going to happen when this, because it's using the internet. So if I'm a store manager, I may cover random states around the country. And so now I have all these different places, stores that I cover. And if you pull down on the mobile app, you'll get this ellipsis, and down at the bottom, you guys see where it says geo filter. If I click it, and you'll see where Seattle shows up because it detects I'm in Seattle automatically. I didn't do that, it just detected it. And I choose Seattle, and you can see how it filtered the report down to just show the stores that are in Seattle. So I'm thinking, a manager.
Well, it's done, isn't it?
It's done. And I'm like, yeah, good job, Patrick. All right, and I was proud, I was really proud of myself. And the lady's like, look at all those dots. I was like, yeah, that's all the stores. You send me a list of them, that's all your stores. She's like, now you thinking about managers. So how many of you guys in here are managers before I say this? Because I don't want to offend anyone. Raise your hand up, raise them high. Okay, I'm about to offend all you guys. We think we're talking about managers. I'm just saying, right? When you give them something and say, go do this, they get confused really quickly. Right? And that was way too many dots for them. That was way too many dots. And I was like, then they could press on the table and then hold it and then press this arrow and then do a drill. She was like, what? There's no way they can do all that, Patrick. You're bananas, man. I was like, okay. My ego was deflated. I was so happy. And so I put all the steps in here. I was so happy about this solution. And this is literally what the lady said. I'm on the phone with her. She said, that's cute. She told me that. She goes, Patrick, that's cute. But, then she got real serious. There could be hundreds of stores in a city, and a manager is responsible for hundreds of stores. And if I put row-level, so I was like, just put row-level security on it. If I put row-level security on it, sure, it's gonna render, but then you're gonna see all those bubbles like you just showed me. How do they get to the store that's closest to them? I was like, well, you didn't say all that when I first talked to you. You just said you want geo-filtering. And I just gave it to you. She was like, nope, that's not gonna work. I said, okay, all right. What about using Power Automate? I started thinking about this. I was sitting in my basement and I was like, how am I gonna solve this problem? She wants to get the longitude and latitude of where that person is. I was like, how could you do this, right? And I do a lot of my best thinking in the shower, so I went and took a shower, and boom, Power Automate came to me. Not Power Automate, Flow. Flow, I was like, oh, I can use Flow to capture Phil's location, okay? And what you can do in Flow is, there's this thing called a trigger, which creates a button for you. And that button can be on your mobile device. And so on my mobile device, on their mobile devices, they put this button for the managers, and when they press that button, guess what it does? It writes the manager's location. So let me show you the Flow. I mean, my session ended. They even changed it in the web browser to call it Power Automate. You guys see that? It's already Power Automate.
So you could have used a Power App and done something similar.
I could have.
But you're keeping it simple and just using Flow only.
Just using
Automate
Flow.
only.
Automate, yep. Power Automate only. And so basically, you add this manual trigger. So when you create your Flow, you just look for trigger and drag it onto the design surface for Flow. And then what I did was, I wrote a stored procedure, and I hadn't written a stored procedure in years. It was bananas to do this, but I wrote this stored procedure that accepted the parameters that the button produce. So the button produces address, city, state, longitude, latitude, right? The columns that you see here are the outputs of what the button can capture. And basically, I wrote a stored procedure that did an upsert based on the manager's email address, because the Flow, the trigger produces an email address as an output. I use the email address as a primary key, not really a primary key, there's just a unique constraint. on the email address to ensure that that email address is not inserted twice, because field can't be in two places at one time, right? And so I wrote an upsert based on the email address. And so when you click that button, if your location already exists in the table, I just update it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's like a write-back scenario.
It's like a write back. It's like a write back. And so let me show you what the flow button looks like. And so there's a few things you need to know about this if you want to try to use this at home, right? And so if you have an iPhone, and I haven't tried this on Android yet because I just don't have an Android handy, but if you use this on an iPhone, you can actually create a widget. Where is it? Right there. So there's widgets that you can create. If I click that, it's going to say it succeeded. Didn't really succeed. And so I email a buddy of mine who works on the Power Automate team, and I said, that's a lot to say on the PA team. Microsoft likes acronyms, right? That's already something, huh? So anyway, I emailed my buddy who works on the Power Automate team, and I said, hey, why doesn't the widget work? He goes, turn on location services. You got to enable location services on your phone because that's the only way it can capture your location. I was like, it is on. He's like, no, it's not. It's like, it's my phone. It's on. I turn it on. I want everybody to know where I'm at all the time, right? Google, Microsoft, I want all of them to know. And so he said, no, it's not. And we went through this whole thing for about 20 minutes. And I said, let me show you. And I showed him. And then he goes, oh, it's not on. I was like, nope, it's not on. And so it won't work. And they know it won't work, and they're working on fixing it. Okay? So what you need to do is download the Flow app for your mobile device. And if you click on buttons, you'll see that I have a big My Location button, and you press that button. Okay? When I press that button, it captures my location. So the managers don't have to do anything because they're using Intune or something like that to push all this stuff out to their phones, their mobile devices, and stuff like that. And all they got to do is press buttons, okay? So they don't know about all the work we did behind the scenes to make this work. So I'm going to take a pause. Any questions or comments? Yes, sir?
What were you writing back to?
A SQL server. So the question is, what was I writing back to? And so basically, I just created a really simple table on an Azure SQL database called My Location somewhere. It's on here somewhere. Oh, that's the views. Right there, called My Location. And it's just a table. It contains a few columns, and most of them are the columns from the output from the Flow button.
And it's just one row per person.
It's just one row per person.
If the person hasn't used it before, it'll insert a row.
That's right.
Every time they hit the button, it's going to update the values with their location.
Yep.
Nice and simple.
Yeah, pretty simple. See, and the most important thing was the longitude and latitude, and I'll explain why. And this is one of the reasons Phil's here, because I read a blog post that Phil wrote, and I didn't realize Phil was like this extreme mathematician. He's going to explain some really heavy math to you guys in a little bit. It's amazing what Phil did. It was impressive. All right. You guys following me? Yep. And so then what I was able to do is I created another report in my Power BI. And I was so excited about this. And so I called the account person up and I said, hey, time for another meeting, buddy. I got this thing solved. I got this thing solved. And he was like, okay, you remember the last meeting? I was like, yep, I got it. So I created another Power BI report with the Flow button. And I was so excited about this. I kind of knew this wasn't going to work, but I gave it a go anyway. And so what you'll see here as soon as it renders, because now I have the location, of course the internet's not gonna play well. I'll switch, I know what I'll do. Hopefully it'll render. But I have the location, and so using that location, I was able to mark my location using conditional formatting in the Power BI report. So what I did was I had their stores table, I did a union to that table, and I added my location, which is just the same information as the store addresses, and I added one column that said, this is where I'm at.
So conditional formatting meaning your dot is a different color
Yes.
to the stores around you.
That's right. Yeah. That's right, Phil. And so, all right, perfect. So it rendered. And so that's it right there, but what happened was this broke geo-filtering. because I needed to be drilled down all the way to the physical address, and I don't have city or state just by itself on the map. So it broke it, and so I was on the phone. I didn't realize it broke it before I got on the phone with them, so it's kind of embarrassing. But if you double tap the map, I said, just pinch it. I said, just pinch, just keep doing this, right? And like, this is a true story, I can't make this up. And I was like, okay, let's see. That one is the closest. That store right there, right? That blue dot, you guys can't see. This blue dot right here is the closest. Click it, and then the table will filter. And she was like, no, stop. She's like, that's enough. This is enough, Microsoft. Is there somebody else on your team that I can talk to? Because obviously you are clueless. And I was like, hold on, wait a minute. All right, the third attempt. And so the challenge that this presented was that when you design a Power BI data set, and so I was trying to explain this to Phil yesterday, and it was a long process. Even though he's really good at math, understanding the way data sets refresh, not his strong point.
Now, I was not the only one that struggled with this simple concept.
I'm not going to say who the other person was that struggled, all right? So when you create a Power BI, a model in Power BI, and you publish it to the Power BI service, how many data sets is there? It's not a trick question. One. There's one data set. If there's just one person using the model, when that person clicks the button to insert their address, I can say refresh the data set with Power Automate, right? Or Logic Apps, or PowerShell, or some REST API. I could do something to get that data set to refresh. Does that make sense?
So a lot of Power BI models, when you publish them, you might schedule it to just refresh once a day.
Yep.
In the early morning as part of the ETL process.
Yep.
That's how the data gets updated into the published Power BI data set.
Yes.
And at that point, it's read-only. And
Yes.
nothing in that data set will change until the very next time the data set refreshes.
Yes.
But with Patrick's system, he's got it built into the flow so that...
It could change anytime.
Yeah, you actually force a refresh, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Which sounds really, really good, but...
Again, that's cute. That's what she said, right? She likes this word cute, right? It's just like, oh, gut check. And she was like, but we have hundreds of stores. How many managers do you think we have? One? We got several managers. And if they're all pressing that button, who's going to refresh the model? Whose data is going to get in the model when we refresh?
It's going to be a mess.
It's going to be a mess. It's going to be a mess, right? It's chaos. It was literal chaos. And so I was like, okay, I'll be back. I'm going to take another shower. I got to think about this, all right? I got to think about this. And so I thought about it, and I called Phil up, and I was like, hey, Phil, thinking about doing some composite models and maybe an aggregation or something like that. And I know you kind of know a little bit about this stuff. Give me a hand, Phil.
Now, I live in New Zealand, right? So when he calls me during the day, it's 3 a.m. Patrick, what?
And so
I'm helpful. Yeah.
we had to use a composite model, right? And you want to talk about composite models a little bit?
That's right. So I'm just going to describe briefly what composite models are.
Yep.
And for a start, they're composite models, not composite models.
Okay. Power Automate.
No, I'll try and translate. Composite models.
Composite models. Is that right? Composite? It's composite. Right?
Yeah. I speak English, I don't know. What pidgin dialect you guys speak.
Okay, all right. Touche, my friend, touche.
So Power BI, when Power BI started, had 2 storage modes when you wanted to work with data. There was import and there was direct query, and hopefully you sort of understand what those 2 things are. But the limitation was when you created a new Power BI data set or model, you had to make the decision, I'm going to be 100% import or I'm going to be 100% direct query.
Yep.
And there are pros and cons, and there are good scenarios when you would choose one over the other, and vice versa. But then last year or the year before, we introduced this concept called composite model or hybrid model that allowed the report dataset author to be able to pick and choose at the table level which ones were going to be imported into the model and which ones could be left out in the data source. So in this case, the data resides in the SQL database table in Azure. The tables that you bring into the model are going to be in memory, really close to the report, really, really, really fast. But they'll only be as fresh as the last time you've refreshed that data set. And for a lot of Power BI reports, that's once a day. It might even be less frequently.
But for me, it didn't work.
No, not for you.
Yeah.
But obviously direct query, it's live, it's real time. So every time your report visual refreshes or appears on the page, it's going to fire the query back to your data set and get the very latest data and then and bring that back.
Yeah.
So that's what the composite model is giving us the combination between the two.
So I should always do direct query.
There are pros and cons.
Oh.
There are definitely good scenarios for direct query.
Sure.
Import storage modes will give you the fastest performance, best performance,
Okay.
because it's in memory and it's close to the report.
Yeah.
If you've got very, very busy reports that are going to get hit by a lot of people, that'll give you the best performance. But Import.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But direct query suits real-time scenarios like this, or perhaps you've got some very, very large data sets that you can't fit into memory.
Yeah.
Then you would choose direct query.
So let me ask you guys this. How many of you guys use direct query regularly? All right, and so the follow-up question is why? And I'm not saying, trying to be funny or anything, but why, right? Was there a negotiation with the consumers, or did you just make this? I'm sorry?
Security is one of them.
Security.
So you choose direct query for security reasons.
Yeah, because we want the person who runs the report to be authenticated against the data source.
Because you already have your row-level security built into the back-end data source.
So we did not want to embed data into the metadata of the report itself by importing, which is
Okay, all right. Yeah, okay, yeah.
After we close out each quarter, we sometimes need what we call overrides to our month-end data.
Yeah.
And rather than having to have flow buttons that are letting parts of our model refresh midday, we instead let the users use a flow grid, PowerApps grid, connected directly to a table. It's a little bit of data.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so it just, if there's a value present, it gets replaced.
Nice. Yep. Close to real time. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking for. Yep.
We are creating cubes.
You're querying cubes?
Yes, we do.
Because you need composite models for live connections.
No, we don't need
But why do you query cubes then?
all our data. All our data sources are cubes.
Okay.
Fair
All
enough.
right.
That sounds
okay.
like
Fair
live
enough.
connection.
Yeah.
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 Parameterized queries.
Parameterized queries. Another good reason, right? And so real time is what we needed for this. Not near real time. We needed it as fast as possible. And we needed a sense of a parameterization for something that we're going to use later with Phil's diabolical math that he did.
you get rid of scheduling too.
And get rid of scheduling and to minimize scheduling. The thing I'll say about direct query is, and Phil's going to talk about some limitations, don't give in to your end users when they say they need real time, because nine times out of 10 what I find is they really don't. And there's a lot of cases that I see with people that's using premium capacity where they're over scheduling because they don't know how premium capacity works, and so they actually get throttled because they're trying to refresh something that only data gets loaded once a day. Your data warehouse loads at night, but believe it or not, some of the largest organizations that Microsoft work with, even though the data warehouse only loads once, guess how many times they refresh their data set during the day? 6. Why can't we refresh it more? It's already refreshed 48 times. Your data only changes one time at night. So, I mean, just little things to think about, right? When your end users say, hey, we need real time, they probably don't.
I am not a Power BI Premium
Sure.
customer.
Yeah.
Do you target a specific table to refresh or no?
No, no. Good question. So the question is, can I refresh just a specific table in my model? Not right now, not that I know of.
But
If
you
do,
can put a specific table into direct query mode and leave the rest of the model in import, And in this particular scenario, you don't actually need composite model to solve.
No.
You could have left it 100% import model to get that ability to see what is the latest values in that location table every single time.
Yeah.
It's just what the composite model gives you is the advantage of taking static tables that don't change and bringing them into memory,
Yep.
and you'll get the best performance for speed, and that can be quite important.
So I can cache some tables
Yeah.
and have some tables direct query.
Yeah, so
right?
slices and filters would be great
Yeah.
if they're sitting there in memory.
Yeah.
But then the one or two tables where you need that real-time data, set them to
Sure.
direct query in the same model.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah, very, very important when you do go with direct query is that you tune your data source. It's only going to be as good as the direct query data source, whether it's SQLDB or SQLDW or any of the many data sources that do support direct query. There's a page on that we published that list, and it's quite long and extensive. However, we have seen scenarios again where they ring us up and say our reports are slow, are using direct query? Yes. And you go and have a look, and there's some horrible, horrible things going on, like views on top of views on top of views, no indexes, and it's just not tuned. And a competent DBA can work wonders and,
Yes.
and make the direct query table perform a lot better, and it just flows through naturally and nicely down to your report. So that's very important, is performance of the back end. There's probably always something that you can do to make it better.
Yeah.
We don't support live connections yet.
Do you guys know, you understand what he's saying? Okay, all right, I just want to make sure.
No, it's the end of the day. They just don't want us to.
Well, because this comes up a lot, right? So I want to have import for some tables, but I want to live connect to SSAS model.
Yeah, or
you
have a
can't do that.
exactly.
You just can't do that today.
So we're working on it. So
Yeah.
keep your eye out later
Yeah.
next year, maybe.
Next year.
You
You gave a date.
Amir
Somebody's going to tweet
Amir
it.
does it all the
Phil
time.
Seamark said next year we'll have live connection composite models.
Amir does it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, so with direct query, you have to be careful. There's not all DAX works.
Yeah,
You might need a gateway, and gateways can be helpful, but they can also provide extra layer of complexity and headache. Data consistency is an interesting one too. So data consistency, what you need to understand is that when you hit the table, you're getting potentially the very latest data. And if you've done things like aggregations or summary tables in your model, they're not necessarily always going to align. So as the report author, it's just something you have to consider and manage. It doesn't happen automatically for you. So,
Yeah.
and what's that? Yeah, aggregation tables.
Yep.
Is that still true? You can go from direct to import, but not from import to direct?
So the question is, we need to show this. So we made a slight change to the model. And what we did was, so the model is rather simple. It was only 2 tables. And so one table, I'm going to answer your question. So one table, it was kind of backwards the way we did this. Because typically, when you do a composite model, the fact table is what is direct query.
Yeah, the
Largest table, which was interesting because when we did this for them, the dimension is what was actually direct query, because that's where we're storing all the locations at.
So in this diagram, the table on the right
Yeah.
is the table with 1 row per manager, and that will have their latest position, latitude and
Yeah.
longitude. And that's the real time, that's the direct query one. So every time you look at this model and it uses data from that particular table, it's going to get the latest XY position. And yeah, you're right, the fact table on the left, in this case, will only have data as fresh as the last time it got refreshed, which might be daily.
Yeah. And so the question that he asked was, so when we set this up, Power BI allows 3 different storage modes, okay? So Power BI allows you to be in, why are you doing this to me? Anyway, import, direct query, or dual mode, okay? Import is always, go ahead.
That was that important thing. I was asking you that we have to say.
Oh, dual.
Yes.
Yeah, we've
No,
gotta-
you can't. Once you go from direct query to import,
Yeah.
you can't go back
You
to
can't
direct
go back.
query.
So you see what I'm saying? Direct query and dual is disabled. So once you go into import mode, you can't switch back to direct query or dual, and you need to make sure. So what I do is, whenever I think I'm maybe doing a composite model or I'm going to do some aggregations, I direct query everything. I just say I'm going to direct query all my tables, because I can go from direct query to dual or import, but I can't go from import back.
Yeah, once you go import, you don't go back.
You don't go back. You don't go back, right? And so we change one table to direct query, and we change the other one to import. because every time they run the report, I want to get the latest longitude and latitude. And this view that I built, and it works against views also, this view that I built combines their stores with my location, does some calculations and things like that. So whenever you run it, it's running that query on the back end. And I have not optimized the table, so it's going to be kind of slow, but it's okay. It's okay. All right.
Okay, so you clicked the button before, didn't you? So it's updated with your location.
Yes,
So if you went and walked over there and clicked the button again, it'll...
Yeah, it'll change. It'll change. All right? Okay, you guys following? Now, sometimes you run into a scenario where you have large volumes of data. And we actually hit this with this particular customer. Okay, they had a tremendous amount of data. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of millions of rows, almost a billion rows of data. And we ran into a challenge because when we were in direct query mode, guess what happened? It was kind of slow.
So this was a different set of data, not the one we're talking about.
Not this particular model, but it lent itself to that model.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the front part of it, and then this went even further, and we had to introduce aggregations. So how many of you guys have used aggregations? Not many people. So a lot of people don't use aggregations. They stay away from aggregations because they think that composite models and aggregations require premium. Do they? They don't. And a lot of people don't know that. I was at a conference in Europe recently, and the guy was presenting, and he's like, you don't want to do composite models and aggregations because they require premium. I waited till his session was over. I was really polite, and I walked up to him and said, you were wrong. I was like, you lied to those people. And he was like, what are you talking about? I said, it requires premium. He was like, yeah, it does require premium. I was like, show me. He opened up, he went to the documentation, and this is what he said. I'll be damned. It doesn't. It's like, I told you lied. So no, it doesn't require premium at all. And so it can help. Aggregation can also help minimize the size of models also.
Yeah, so what actually are aggregations?
Yeah.
Aggregations are just tables in your model. They're just much smaller. They're summarized. They're grouped down. They lose some dimensionality or grain. And they help you cheat. Because if you have a table that has 100 million rows, and you just want to get a sum of one of those particular columns. Now you can sum the 100 million row table and arrive at a result. But if you create a summarized version of that table with far fewer rows, and you run a sum over a column in the new summary table, it can still produce exactly the same result, but much, much quicker. So aggregations are just simply tables in your model, and you have to create them. They don't get created automatically for you. You have to manage them, you have to manage populating them, and it's very important that the timing of the population of these tables makes sense for the data set that you're working on, so you don't mismatch maybe direct queries to other tables that might be newer.
Yep.
But what we do is we have a feature called Ag Awareness. So when you create your aggregation tables inside Power BI, you can enable a feature to say, I want to magically map, if the end user queries what they think is that very large table, and we have a very large table here, we will redivert that query to the much smaller aggregation table. There's a little bit of work to do to set this up, but we have an example here.
Yeah.
So imagine your boss comes to you and says, hey Phil, I've got a data set here that I want you to analyze. And you're like, okay, cool. And I want you to make it a Power BI report for the company. It's like, yeah, sounds all right. How big's the table? And he says, Phil, it's 50 billion rows. And I have a table like this. And you're like, okay, this is going to have speed problems. And he says, yeah, and this report is going to get used by half the company. So there's going to be a heavy load on this. A lot of people are going to hit your report all the time. Now, I could set up a Power BI report to direct query. I'm certainly not going to import 50 billion rows into Power BI. I could direct query that table, and I can get it to work, but it's going to be incredibly slow. So this is where aggregations come in, where I can be smart and say, my 50 billion row table is telemetry data over 2 years. So there's a lot of activity per day. And the chances are my end users aren't going to want to analyze down to the second. So I can make a summarized version of that table to be maybe user by day by other important dimension, like location, store, whichever, and create a much, much smaller table. And in my case, what I was able to do was create an aggregate table that had 12 million rows.
12 million rows. So we went from 50 billion
50 billion rows,
to a 12 billion aggregation
down to
table.
12 billion, and I could still perform really complex, rich analytics over that table. And I imported that table into Power BI. File save as, it's 30 megs, 35 megs, quite manageable. You know, publish it, it's all pretty cool. And what that allows me to do is create a whole lot of reports that will hit the aggregation table and be really fast. But then when the end user does drill down to the point that it can't be covered by that aggregation table, it'll create a query that's quite focused, fire it out to the data source, and hopefully if your data source is tuned really well, they'll get a result set fairly quickly. So we've got that data set here.
Let me ask you a question. Because I'm confused. Where do I create these aggregation tables at?
You need to create them, ideally in the data source.
In the data source.
In the data
Okay.
source.
But if I don't have them in the data source, I can do it in Power Query using the group by function
but
or something like that, okay? So if you don't have access to the source and you can't create that aggregation, you still can use aggregations because you can use Power Query. There's a group by function in Power Query to build out that aggregation.
But the
All right?
important thing is the aggregation is in memory. Although you can actually leave that aggregation table out in direct query if you still have a very large aggregation table. And I have had examples of this where the aggregation table was still in the order of 3 billion rows. So you can actually use the ag awareness feature for both the ag table and the really big table in direct query. So we've got a report here that this is a real PBIX file, and it's pointing to a 50 billion row table sitting out in a SQL DW, which is not scaled up particularly fast. And we have a measure here called events.
Just events, a really simple measure.
Which is just a count of rows in the table. That's it. So it's going to return a number, so long as we don't slice and dice it by anything else, of 50 billion, 50 point something billion.
It's still spinning, so I'm going to delete it. I don't want to kill everything. So we're going to add an aggregation.
Yeah, so at the moment, when he dragged that measure to the canvas, it's going to fire out that direct query, and it's going to give us really poor performance. It will return, but in minutes, not seconds. So we have this aggregate table here in the model, and what Patrick is going to do is show the dialog where you perform that mapping. So he's going to go into the manage aggregation dialog of our ag table, scroll down to the column that we care about, and you see we're skipping all this other stuff. We don't have to actually map in all the dimensions, and we can say that the sum of this year column in our aggregate table is an alternative of the same column name in the very large slow direct query table. So once we've set this mapping up, the engine knows.
Did you see that?
That was fast, was it? You sure that's not cached?
It's not cached.
That is genuinely going to the.
So look, 50 billion rows.
But we're cheating.
A little bit.
Yeah, we're cheating. And we're being smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're working smart, not hard.
Not hard. Not lazy, just efficient.
But this particular 12 million row table still has the dimensionality or the granularity of all of the other dimensions in this model, including date. So we can drag any field from the date table onto that calculation, and boom, we're talking milliseconds as opposed to minutes.
Wow.
And
right? One important thing though, if I have a relationship between my aggregation table and my dimensions, do I need to build aggregations at every level of that dimension?
Oh, look, Patrick, I've warned you, never ask me about relationships. What was the question again? No, if you have a relationship between the ag table and the dimension table, that is the best, because that will allow you to use any field in the dimension table, and it will still work.
So like my date table, I
Yes.
just have a relationship between that aggregation between the surrogate keys, the two keys that allow the relationship. So any column in that table will work and it'll hit the aggregation.
Yep, year, month, day, week, doesn't matter. It'll still hit the ag and give you the fast performance.
Visual Studio Tablet Model Designer.
You can't. So the question is, how do I do this with SSAS? It's not supported. Next question.
It is supported. No, the
Yeah,
question,
they'll turn it on.
Can I do it? No. Can I
Yeah.
do this in Azure AES? Yes, you can, but you have to do it manually.
Yes.
So you have to actually write DAX code
Yes.
to effectively simulate that. So
And
there's
Phil
a bit
has
of
the
work.
code.
And I've got blog posts, etc. like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, you manage it yourself. But it's the same thing, and you should do it. You know, all models, and it's not just for big models as well. Small models will benefit from ags.
Yes.
Because if you've got a lot of people hitting it, if you can get queries down from 1 second to half a second or 3 seconds to milliseconds by using ags, it can make much better use of your capacity. Your end users will just get a much snappier report experience. They'll be happy. Your managers will be happy. So it is not just for big data models.
One of the things I did with one of our customers, they had 70 models. They had 70 models, and they had them on their P1 capacity, and they were trying to refresh them all at the same time. The only reason they had them on a P1 capacity is because they exceeded the 1 gig limit. Okay? I mean 10 gig, right? 1 gig. Pro is 1 gig. Is that right? Yeah, Pro is 1 gig. So they exceeded the 1 gig limit on Pro, and they had to go to P1 because they had all these models that were just above that limit. And what we did, right? What we did was we took a lot of those models and we built aggregations on top of their tables. And guess what happened to the size of those models? Shrunk. And we moved a lot of them back to shared capacity. And so instead of having 4 or 5 P1s, the account team wasn't happy with me because they missed their quota a little bit. But they stopped, they just didn't renew their licenses for those capacities because they just didn't need them.
Yeah, and you can be clever with aggregations. You don't have to aggregate the entire 2 years. You could actually only bring in the last 3 months if you expect that your end users are going to be just really reporting on recent stuff. And that can also bring down the size of your model and refreshing and all other goodness. There was a question at the back there.
Okay. So in Power BI Desktop, you can create multiple views, kind of like multi-dimensional models. You can have data source views.
So the question was?
Oh, the question was, where's the fact table? Where's the table with all the information in it? And so this view, we just didn't include it on this view. But if you go back to the all tables, you'll see it's in here somewhere. The big table is, oh, there goes my fact events. So,
and that's quite a nice feature, actually.
Yeah.
And a recommendation I've heard that I like, on if you've got a very, very busy model with lots and lots of tables, is create a tab for each fact table. So you just only bring in the single fact table and then only the dimensions that relate to that, and you get a much simpler, easier, visually digestible experience when you're looking at the model. You should see some of the things we get sent.
Yeah.
Like 300 tables and just lines everywhere, and
it's massive.
Yep.
All right, so we had these struggles earlier with composite models and aggregations, but we got past it. And they were starting to get happy. So I was talking to the lady who was over the project. She was like the manager for the whole team. And she was starting to, she didn't want a new team member. She was okay working with me. She was like, okay, maybe you kind of know what you're talking about, okay? But even with the getting real time for longitude and latitude, putting the aggregations in place, making everything work, we still had a problem because we didn't have a way to figure out what was the closest stores, right? How do I calculate the distance between my location and the location of all the stores that's in the surrounding area? How do I do it? So we sprinkled a little DAX on it. So I did a search on the internet. I chose my favorite search engine, Bing, and I did a quick search.
hasn't been renamed.
Bing?
Yet.
So I used Bing, and I landed on Phil's blog, and Phil wrote this really interesting DAX. And so I've talked to, before you guys say this, before anyone says this, yes, you could do this in T-SQL. Yes, you could do this with R. Yes, you could do this probably a million other ways. I know how to write DAX, okay? With a little help from Phil, and Phil's gonna explain this line by line for you guys, so I'm gonna sit down, and he's a heck of a mathematician.
Yeah, technically I didn't write it. I binged.
You binged it?
Found someone who actually knows what they're doing
Yeah.
and took the formula and just pasted it into a DAX calculation. Wrote a blog about it because I thought, hey, this is cool. They completely forgot about it until Patrick rang me up at 3 o'clock in the morning going, Phil. Do you remember that? Like,
And
no,
so
no.
I was able to create this, and the key to it was you couldn't do this in Power BI until they introduced that pi function up there. And so once they introduced the pi, you can get the circumference of the Earth, and then you can use some fancy formulas to pull out some things and do a diff on your longitude and latitude. And Phil had his in kilometers because I don't know why. So I converted
Because I'm
it
from
to-
the rest of the world.
I converted it to miles, and I was able to write a DAX expression that would actually give me the distance that a store is from my physical location, okay? It took a little bit to figure out the conversion between kilometers and miles, but I got that figured out really easily with Bing. There's a converter that Bing provides to me. So I was able to.
And something like that formula would work quite nicely in like a what-if type
Yes,
slider scenario
absolutely,
as well. So
absolutely.
you
I just
could-
did a video on what if. So Phil's point was, if we could use this in a what if. Are you about to say something about the formula?
Yeah, what if your company's global and you need it in kilometers?
Yeah, absolutely correct. Then you would have to figure that out, right? A good point. So his question is, what if your company's global and you need kilometers? You can do some things in DAX like switching and things like that to decide, hey, we want to do kilometers, we want to do miles. All it is, honestly, is you see that number 7918, you need to multiply by 2 point something and it'll bring it back to kilometers and it works. It's not, you know.
Yes, a search engine will be your friend
Yeah,
in that
yeah.
scenario.
Yeah, you can make it work. But what I did with this that was interesting was I took the results. So I added a calculated column that gave me the distance each store was from my location. And then I used a little more DAX. So let me show you what I did.
To sort and filter the...
Yeah, so I added a little more DAX to the model to give me I created a slicer out of it, right? And so if you guys don't know the shortcut keys, if you hold down Control and if you have a scroll on your mouse, you can increase the size of the text in the, so you don't have to use zoom in. Can everybody see that? And so it's a really simple switch function, right? I use variables in your DAX code. I tucked the miles in, then I said, if this is that, if this is this, blah, 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 blah. Yes, you can do this a different way, probably a million other ways. I know what you guys are thinking. Why did he do that? Why did he write it? Who's gonna maintain this, right? It's worked perfect for my demo. Right? And so I made these switches are really specific to the demo. They had some different mile range requirements that they built out. All right, there's a lot of ways you can do this. And then I also did one for the sorting because I wanted them to show in a very specific way. If I'm gonna put this on a OneDrive, and then I'm gonna put all this stuff on a OneDrive. When you try to open some of it, it's gonna be in direct query mode, so you won't be able to. But you still can see the formulas and stuff like that. And so I'll put it all up, and I'll put the OneDrive link in the deck before I upload it. And you're gonna have all. If you make it nicer, send it back so I can look like I'm really smart when I'm presenting this. Okay? All right. And then what I did was, after I got all this set up, I called them back, and I was like, okay, people, I got it. I finally figured it out. And they were excited. She was really excited. And I went back to Power BI. Where's Power BI. And I had number 3, composite with a little DAX. I was so excited when I called them up. So there's number 3. And what you'll see at the top, it's actually gonna be a little slow because of the internet, but you'll have this range slicer at the top. I don't even need the geo filter in Power BI anymore because I can use my range slicer at the top and just say, give me all the stores that are within a specific range. So whenever it loads up, and so I can choose 0.2 miles, 1 mile, whatever ranges I specify. I check that box, and guess what happens? It filters it down to only the stores that's within that, within that distance, and then I can just quickly see the 2 or 3 stores that's in that distance and choose one, drill down, look at the details. And she was like, holy smokes, you're a genius. I was like, a few weeks ago, you didn't want to work with me. So what is it? Am I a genius or what? So it's taking a little bit.
And you can tailor it.
Yeah.
So if you happen to work for a company like Starbucks, anyone work for Starbucks here? and you see your range filter here in Seattle to maybe a few hundred yards, you're still going to get a long list.
Yeah, it's taking a bit to populate the drop-down, but the drop-down just contains what I saw, and when I check 0.2 miles, what will happen is it just refocuses over on, oh, here we go. So if we choose it, and what you'll see happen in a little bit is that the focus of the map is gonna go over to whatever closer to me where that red dot is, and then the table at the bottom is actually gonna filter down to just the stores that's in that list, just like it just did, right? And then you can see I use conditional formatting. This is, why won't you just stay? This is me, and this is the closest store. And then in red right here, this is the address. This is what it picked up, I-5 South. I don't know why, it just picked up I-5 South. But the more important thing was it picked up the longitude and latitude. I was able to use Phil's calculation to do the diff, to give me the distance between these things, create the range slicer. Now right in their phone, they just can choose what they want. And you can see it's just a couple of stores, right? So they should be familiar with this area. They could choose the store they want. And I was like, boom. I did it. And she said, I'm gonna tell you what she said. She said, again, that's cute. And I was like, wait a minute, enough's enough. I feel like I'm just free consulting for you guys. Let me send you my hourly rate. She said, we forgot one really important thing. The manager needs to update the quota for a particular store when he or she is sitting there, but they also want to see the information about that store in a Power BI report. And I was like, man, I don't know how to do that. I said, I have no idea. And then I stumbled across PowerApps. All right? How many of you guys have created a Power App before? So somebody made a comment earlier. I didn't say this. So I didn't say this, but I'm going to I thought it was rather funny. He said, only young people can use PowerApps. And I said, well, what are you saying? And he goes, well, I was like, okay. So I guess I'm too old to use PowerApps. I think that's what he was insinuating. But anyway, and so they needed to create a report, a Power BI report, that provided a level of detail, but they also needed to write back to the model. And what they wanted to happen is when they check that button to update the quota, they want the report to refresh immediately. And I was like, what? That's not gonna work. Fortunately, right around that time, we had just released a new version of the PowerApps, well, it's a native visual now for Power BI, and we enabled something that allowed us to do it. Since we were already doing direct query, it allowed us to do that. And so to do the write back and to get the refresh, the table that you're interfacing with must be in direct query mode in your Power BI report. And I'll explain why in just a little bit.
Which it already was, so.
Yes, it already was, so it wasn't a big deal. It was already in direct query. Any questions?
Oh no, it's a different table.
Yeah, the table was already in direct query mode. All right, so let me show you. So the first thing you need to know about the Power Apps visual is while it appears in the desktop, if you truly want to do Power Apps integration, don't do it in the desktop. There's a disclaimer in the report where it says, don't do it in the desktop, do it in the service. And there's a reason you do it in the service because there's an object that it creates and integrates through some web APIs, and it can't do it in the desktop. It must be in a web browser for it to work.
So we're fixing that? What's the...
I'm not sure the story.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a timeline to make this work a little more seamlessly in the desktop. I know there's a conversation going on,
Sure.
but I'm not sure. All right. So you don't do it in the desktop. What you do is you go over to Power BI, and you would go here in your report, and in my report, I would go into edit mode, right? And then all I would do is add this, click in the white space, and add this element to my report. And if the internet was faster, it would automatically show me oh, here we go, yeah. And so by default, right, it doesn't do anything. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? You need to drag some fields from your list. The fields that you plan on interacting with, you need to drag them into the Power Apps data field, and then you'll see where it changes. It says, hey, do you want to choose an app or do you want to create an app? Okay? So if you've never done this before, you just click create an app, it'll launch the Power App experience, and you can start designing your app. So if I go back over to the web browser, you about to say something, Phil?
So long as you're young enough.
Huh?
So long as you're young enough?
So as long as you're young enough, that's what I was told. I was offended. I was really offended.
So I'll be fine.
Oh. Oh man, this is just not a good thing. Oh, that's why. Oh. I was connected to my phone.
That was actually going quite well. When
Was
you
it?
think where we are, it's pretty good.
Oh, okay, here we go. And so here's my Power App. And so it'll launch the experience for you to create the Power App. And, here it goes. And so you build out your Power App. I am not an expert Power App developer. I'm not pretending to be one. I don't play one on TV. It honestly took me about 15 minutes to build this Power App. Where it did take me a little bit was trying to figure out how to do an upsert. How to say, if this row already exists for this particular store, just update it. If not, insert a new one. And you can't call a store procedure yet. You have to call flow. And I was like, there's got to be an easier way to do this. There actually was. There is a function, but look at this. I want to show you this first. This is really funny. I showed this to Marco and Alberto this morning. In the DAX editor in Power BI Desktop, do we have formatting? We don't. But in PowerApps, they have formatting. Why can't we get it? I'm jealous, right? I'm so jealous. So there's a patch function. I was so excited about this, and he was like, yeah.
So where was that button? Just go back.
So right here, remove formatting, format. I mean, it should be easy to put there. Yeah. So you use this patch function to do an upsert. So you provide the key, you provide the table that you want to update, you provide the key, and then you just pass the values in that you want to update. It's really easy. But what I needed to do after the update happened, after I clicked the update, I needed to refresh the Power BI report because this is in direct query mode, right? And so I added another step to take me back to the home page, and then there's a little function. So this is the part that requires you to do this in the service. This Power BI integration. If you try to do it in the desktop, that integration is like a reference to your Power BI, won't get created, and you won't be able to use this. And so once I did it in the service, I was able to get that, and that's the only method that it exposes right now, .refresh. And so what'll happen is, after I do everything I need to do, I call this, and when I click that button, it refreshes my Power BI report. And if anything is in direct query mode, what does that mean? It goes out and gets the latest data for that, and that's why it needs to be in direct query mode. So it's not refreshing the data set, it's just refreshing the report, and anything that's in direct query mode is gonna be refreshed based on what I've input.
So the user is hands-off, and the number should just appear.
That's right. All right, and so this is what we did. And so if you go back, so I'm sitting with them, I'm actually on site with them now, because I'm pretty confident about everything I've done, really confident. And so we created this report. And so now I'm a manager, and I'm sitting in the store with Phil. Phil's a young, ambitious, new store manager, but doesn't look like Phil's gonna make his quota and I'm gonna have to fire him. That's about what's gonna happen since he's so young, right? I'm gonna fire him. Get somebody in that's a little more seasoned. I knew his dad, that's why I gave him a chance, a little nepotism. But now, Phil, you didn't do your job and you gotta go, right? His dad calls me up before the meeting, he goes, come on, man, don't fire my son. I'm like, okay, all right, but he's gotta do a better job. He's gotta sell more widgets. And so what I'll do is I can go in here and I can say, okay, because I know your dad, you get to keep your job. And all I need to do—
And I wrote that DAX for you.
You did write the DAX. And I'm gonna lower Phil's quota down to 20 million, because he's already made 23 million. And so the check, when I click this check, it's gonna write back to the database, it's gonna refocus to the new page, the old page, and then it's gonna say Power BI integration.refresh, which is gonna cause the report to refresh and run direct query against that source, and then everything will refresh. So I'm gonna go ahead and click check, and then you'll see what happens, and then everything goes green. Phil gets to keep his job. I did a write back, and I just showed you how to integrate Power Automate, Power BI, and Power Apps into one solution. Thank you.
That's slick.
Yeah.
That's slick.
Yeah. Right? Pretty good. Pretty good. Yes. Yes.
How does it work on the mobile device now?
So this is not optimized for mobile. This was intended for the manager when so the question is, how does this work on the mobile device? This was not intended for mobile. This was intended when the manager's sitting with the store manager or whoever it is with the laptop open, with the MacBook, the Surface Book, whatever it is, and they're doing the work and making quota adjustments. But
Yeah, so the mobile device is for, he's in town trying to figure out where to go next.
Yeah.
And he's arrived at the store, laptop's out.
And so this, I see you. And so this, so one thing that I am investigating right now is there is some integration for Power BI into Power Apps, and there's more flow integration in Power Apps, and I'm trying to see if I can do all of this in a single Power App instead of Power BI, Flow. It's kind of disconnected right now. It's kind of a disconnected story, but they like it, they're using it, but I'm trying to consolidate it. And so it's just a little research going on. Yes, he was first, then you, okay. So the question is, what is the language in Power Apps? So this is what I'm gonna call that language. It was like VB and T-SQL went out drinking and produced an offspring. right? I have no idea. It's the Power Apps expression language. It's like the Power Apps expression language. I don't know what the formal name for it is, though.
Because we need more languages, right?
That's the name of it, Power Apps expression language? Bam. Good guess, Patrick.
Yeah.
Somebody else had a question. Right here. Okay. All right, cool. You're the Power Apps guy? You work for Power Apps? Okay, awesome.
If you did it the other way around, because you're saying to do it now, could you get away with not doing the flow?
Because Power Apps can do it, yes. So Jeremy Fry, I don't know if you guys know Jeremy Fry, I was talking to him. Jeremy Fry is doing a session on how he used Power Apps and some kind of locator in a web browser to do this. And he and I chatted about this Tuesday night in the Sheraton lobby, and we're gonna talk about it. But yes, I think if you do everything in Power Apps, you don't have to cause a flow because Power Apps can actually capture your longitude and latitude. The thing is, the thing that I'm not sure of is how the write back would happen all intuitively. I'm thinking I could just put a checkbox and do it. Right, we'll see.
And it's good to know that you can use both.
Yes.
Because there'll be some scenarios where you just don't need to go to all the effort of firing
Yep.
out the Power App stuff, so.
Yep. Yes.
In the final solution, I was still using the flow to catch the location and storing the data into SQL Server.
So in the final solution, the question is, am I still using Flow to capture the data into SQL Server? Yes, right now, they're still using Power Automate to capture the location and store it in SQL Server. Right now, today, right? Right now, today, that's what they're doing. Yes? So the question is, does Power Apps have a security structure? Yes? And so yes, it does. And so I have to share this report out with the people that want to access this before I publish the report, or they won't be able to see it. And so when I load this up, if I don't have permissions, it's going to say, hey, you need to email someone to get permissions to this. So I can just give the managers access, and other people can look at this report, but the Power App won't render. Yes, good question. Yes?
So let's say that you have another customer coming to you and asking for that same solution.
This same solution, yep.
Can package it up and distribute it?
So I can package most of this up. The only thing that I can't package up I would have to give them PBI templates and put parameter. So the question is, can I package this up? So yes, I would have to do a little work on my Power BI files because they're direct, some of them are direct query. And so I would extract them out as PBIT files, Power BI template files. I would parameterize the connection strings. So when they open them up, they would just need to put in their server credentials, then it would direct query and pull the data back. So yes, I can. You can export, there's actually a physical app for this that you can run it locally on your machine. And the same thing with the flow. I can export the flow also, the Power Automate, sorry. Yes?
Does the user write to the SQL table, or is it a service principal or something else?
So the question is, does the user write to the SQL table, or is it something else? When you create the Power App, you create a connection string to the data source, just like any other application you would develop, and you can specify whether or not you want to use the sign-in credential, the person that is logged in, or you can specify an account that you want to use. In this case, I specified an account.
Like a SQL DB
Yeah,
account.
it's like a
username and
SQL DB
password.
account that I wanted to use.
Why the account? Just curious.
Because I don't want to add all those people, grant all those people access to the database. And so I have an account, just like when I'm developing an application, that has really restricted access, only access to the tables or views that it needs. And so when I built my Power App, that account can only see what it needs to see and perform whatever DML actions that I wanted to perform on my database. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
So ArcGIS map has the find a nearby location.
Yep.
Why did they choose that?
So that's a premium feature though, ArcGIS. So the question is, why didn't I use ArcGIS? Great option. They said we're not using ArcGIS. Why can't Power BI do this natively? And also, that's a premium feature of ArcGIS that you have to pay for, and they weren't paying for it. So probably can look at doing something like that. But I tried, that's why I didn't use R, right? Because that's a specialized thing. That's why I didn't use ArcGIS. It's a specialized thing. I tried to keep everything native. So if people wanted it, I could share it, and you can use things that are just native to the desktop.
But if you can, then it's great, because I think ArcGIS has that like
Yeah.
driving distances
Yeah, no,
and takes
he's
into
right.
account
He's
busyness.
right.
This is fairly just dumb radius circle
Yep,
approach.
you're right
so
though. You're absolutely correct. Yes.
Can you use the Power Automate functions as like an action inside of Power BI buttons?
Good question. So the question is, can I use Power Automate, can I use buttons in Power BI to fire off a flow? right? And the answer right now is no. That is something that's being discussed, I know for a fact, and there's more things, more Power BI and Flow integration coming. Yes.
But as you can see, you've got that functionality with PowerApps. So
That was a good question. Oh, that was a good question. Yes.
If the manager wanted driving directions, Power BI.
So if the manager wanted driving directions, I don't think Power BI can do that. I haven't tried, I haven't attempted, if somebody knows, but we would probably have to call some kind of REST API.
you could probably do it in DAX, but it
Yeah.
would be a lot of DAX.
It would be a lot of DAX.
You would need a lot of data. I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah.
Could you do Power Automate with Azure Maps?
Maybe. So the comment is, there's probably a way to do it, right? There's probably a way to get driving directions. I just didn't go down that road, but there's probably a way. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea.
This is limitless.
Yeah, yeah.
To
So,
highlight that this is, because after I watched your video,
Yeah.
similar, I implemented this, but with the import model.
yeah,
And
yeah.
calling out Flow to refresh specific tables, and
Yep.
it still works. You
Yeah.
can do it 1,000 different ways.
1,000 different ways. So the reason that Phil and I, we do this session is, it's the art of the possible, right? This won't fit. Probably no one will go out and adopt this in their organization. This was a very specific thing. But think about the possibilities, right? The things that you could possibly do with these 3 technologies, maybe just 2 of them, maybe all of them, it's limitless, it's boundless. And it's how much code did I technically write, right? I copied and pasted most of it, but very little code. This is a low code solution that probably took me, if I wouldn't have been going back and forth with them, probably took me about 16 hours to finish the entire solution. All right, any other questions?
We will be sticking around
Yeah,
at
for a
the
few
end of the
minutes.
session
Yeah.
for a little while, so feel
Yeah.
free to come up and say hi and ask some more specific
All right.
questions.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you
so
very
much.
much.